Imagine this. You're walking down a quiet street, trees rustling overhead, the world moving gently around you, and then suddenly, they're there again. Not physically, not audibly, but so vividly in your mind. It's as if they've stepped into your chest. You weren't thinking about them 5 seconds ago. You don't even want to be thinking about them. And yet, like a ghost summoned from the unconscious, their presence returns. Their voice, their eyes, the way they said your name that one time when everything felt right and wrong all at once. Why? Why does this one person continue to echo inside your head, uninvited, at strange and inexplicable moments? Days, months, even years after your last encounter, they remain, like a haunting, like a thread you can't untangle, no matter how many times you try to sever it. And here's the strangest part: sometimes you hate it. Sometimes you like it, sometimes it tortures you, and sometimes it comforts you, but it never leaves you neutral. That's what makes it different. It's not just a memory, it's something alive inside you. So you start asking yourself, is this love? Is it obsession? Is it trauma? Or is there something else, something deeper beneath the surface of your conscious mind? Maybe you've tried everything: therapy, time, distractions, new relationships, spiritual practices, and yet the same face keeps returning like a lighthouse on the dark coastline of your thoughts. Guiding or warning, who can even tell anymore? It's not always a romantic attachment either. It could be an old friend, a parent, an enemy, someone you wronged, someone who wronged you, or someone who simply slipped away. But the question remains: why are they still here, inside your mind? Why the man, not the thousands of others you've met, touched, laughed with, forgotten? Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." But what if that fate wears the face of someone else? What if they are the symbol your unconscious has chosen? What if they're not just a person, but a portal? What if every time you think about them, you're not really thinking about them, but about you? A version of you trapped in a moment, in a longing, in a myth your psyche can't seem to let go of. There's something intoxicating and terrifying about the idea that your mind is not entirely your own. That the thoughts you think are not just yours, but are shaped by forces older and deeper than your waking self. That some people appear in your life, not just to teach you something, but to awaken something dormant, hidden, ancient. Could it be that your persistent thoughts about this person aren't random at all? Could it be that your soul is trying to resolve a story written long before you knew the language? Or worse, could it be that your mind is clinging to a fantasy, a projection, a wound, because facing the truth of who you are without them would be too much? There is no peace in confusion, but there is danger in certainty, because sometimes certainty is a lie we tell ourselves to avoid the deeper question. Like, what if I don't miss them? I miss who I was with them. What if I'm not haunted by their memory, but by the meaning I attach to them? And what if that meaning was never about reality at all? There's a war happening beneath the surface of your thoughts, between memory and meaning, soul and shadow, love and illusion. And the person who won't leave your mind may be the battlefield on which it plays out. You feel it, don't you? That quiet tug, that mysterious ache, that recurring name in your dreams, or that flicker in your chest when someone mentions them. It's more than coincidence, more than biology, more than nostalgia. It's something archetypal. And if Carl Jung was right, it may not be them you're thinking about, it may be the symbol they represent in the deeper architecture of your psyche. But what do they symbolize? A forgotten desire? A suppressed trauma? A disowned part of yourself? Or are they the very reflection of your inner world, your shadow, your animus, your longing for wholeness appearing in the only form your soul knew you would notice? The answer to that question could change everything. And once you see what's really happening behind the scenes of your thoughts, you'll never look at memory, emotion, or attachment the same way again. But to understand why someone is always on your mind, you must first understand what the mind truly is. And that journey begins not in the present, but in the murky, mythic depths of the unconscious, where the most dangerous truths are the ones you've unknowingly made sacred. You felt the pull, that unshakable, often irrational magnetism of a person lodged in your psyche. And now comes the uncomfortable truth. This isn't just about them. It never was. The image of someone constantly occupying your thoughts is a psychological fingerprint of something far older, far more primal, etched into the very architecture of your being. Carl Jung didn't see thoughts or emotions as random. He believed they were the language of the unconscious, the vast hidden part of your mind that speaks in dreams, symbols, and compulsions. And when someone is always on your mind, it's not because you've chosen to think about them. It's because some deeper part of you is using their image to tell you something. Something you've been avoiding, something you need to confront. In Jung's framework, we each carry within us not just personal memories, but archetypes, universal patterns, characters, and myths inherited through generations. When someone becomes lodged in your mind like a splinter in your consciousness, it's often because they've activated one of those archetypes. They've awakened a part of you that was previously sleeping. They become, in essence, a mirror. Maybe they mirror your longing for the nurturing mother you never truly had, or the father figure who was present in body but absent in soul. Maybe they reflect the lover archetype, the unfulfilled, unspoken craving for union, passion, wholeness. Or maybe they awaken the shadow, the hidden, darker aspects of yourself that you've banished from your self-image. Desire, anger, envy, vulnerability. That person may be real, but the fixation is psychic. This is where the paradox unfolds. The more intense your thoughts about them, the more likely it is that you're not obsessed with them, but with what they represent, a forgotten part of yourself, an exile from your inner kingdom. And so, the mind keeps circling back, not because you are weak or foolish or hopelessly in love, but because your soul is crying out to be seen. The real tragedy? Most people never look beyond the face. They never hear the message beneath the obsession. Carl Jung called this dynamic projection. When we encounter someone who stirs us deeply, whether through infatuation, hatred, or a strange, wordless fascination, it often means we've projected an internal element of ourselves onto them. We're not seeing them. We're seeing us reflected back in disguise. Think of it this way. Your conscious self is like a house with many rooms, but there are doors you've locked, basements you've sealed, boxes you've never opened. And then someone enters your life, a stranger, a lover, a ghost stand, without knowing why. They seem to hold the key to one of those forbidden doors. Your unconscious whispers, "That's it. That's the one." But it's not really them. It's what they unlock in you. Consider Friedrich Nietzsche's haunting idea that when you look long into an abyss, the abyss also looks into you. When someone lives rent-free in your head, you're not just gazing into the memory of a person. You're gazing into an abyss of meaning, desire, fear, and unmet needs. And yes, it stares back. Arthur Schopenhauer, with his bleak but razor-sharp clarity, believed that desire itself is suffering. To desire someone who isn't physically present is to suffer from a craving that cannot be quenched. But what makes it more insidious is that we often confuse the object of our desire with the feeling we think they can give us. We don't want them. We want what we felt with them. Or worse, we want what we never got from them, but imagined we could. Do you see the trap? You may not be addicted to the person, but to the possibility. The possibility that they could complete something inside you, heal something, return something that was lost long before they ever entered your life. This is the myth of completion, the illusion that someone else holds the missing piece of your soul. Jung warned of this myth constantly. He saw it in romantic delusions, spiritual projections, even political ideologies. The belief that wholeness lies out there is one of the most seductive lies ever told by the unconscious. But here's the deeper problem. The more you chase the image, the more distant the truth becomes. The more you fixate on the person, the less you understand the part of yourself that created the fixation to begin with. It becomes a psychological Ouroboros serpent eating its own tail. Memory chasing meaning, meaning chasing illusion, illusion chasing longing. And still, they remain in your mind. Aldous Huxley once remarked that experience is not what happens to a man. It is what a man does with what happens to him. When someone haunts your thoughts, it's not the event of knowing them that matters. It's what your psyche did with that experience, how it shaped it, twisted it, mythologized it, turned it into a symbol to explain something unexplainable inside you. Perhaps they were your first taste of vulnerability, or the only one who saw the part of you you were taught to hide, or the one who rejected you in precisely the way your younger self feared they would. And so, the mind returns to them over and over, not to relive the past, but to try to repair it. This is the hidden root. Your unconscious is trying to complete a broken narrative. But what if that story can never be finished the way you want it to? What if the only way forward is to realize that they were never the story that you were? Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." But what happens when we construct entire chapters of ourselves around people who were never meant to stay? What happens when our identity fuses with a symbol that never belonged to us in the first place? The person who's always on your mind may be the phantom limb of an identity you haven't yet shed. They may be the ghost of a former self, still clinging to life. And until you face the inner architecture that built that fixation in the first place, you'll continue to mistake the echo for the origin, the projection for the truth, the person for the message. But what is that message? What is your unconscious really trying to say? To answer that, we must explore the toll this internal fixation takes not just on your thoughts, but on your very way of being in the world. Because the longer someone stays in your mind, the more your life begins to bend around their absence. And that's where the consequences begin. You don't notice it at first. The way your thoughts bend, without your permission. How your decisions, small ones, like what music you avoid, or larger ones, like who you're drawn toward, quietly influenced by the shape of someone else's memory. You move through life believing you are free, autonomous, self-directed. But there they are. Still, a name that tightens your stomach. A city you won't visit. A look on a stranger's face that floods you with old ache. A silence you suddenly dread because you know exactly who will fill it. This is the quiet invasion. Not of a person, but of a symbol rooted so deeply into your mental soil that you no longer remember what the landscape looked like before it arrived. This is where the real damage begins. Not in the remembering, but in the distortion. Because what begins as memory nostalgic, meaningful, human can evolve into something far more insidious. A cognitive loop, a recursive cycle in which your brain, in its desperate need for resolution, keeps returning to the same image, the same moment, the same imagined what if. Your thoughts become a feedback chamber. And within that chamber, the figure of the person, this person you can't seem to escape, mutates, grows, shrinks, idealizes, demonizes, becomes everything and nothing. They stop being them. They become a psychological construct, a fantasy, a distortion of your own making. Neuroscience has a name for this: Perseveration, the repeated return to a specific thought, especially when it no longer serves any adaptive purpose. You don't return to the thought because it's useful. You return because your mind is stuck in the ritual of returning, like a scratched record, like a religion built around longing. And this repetition does something else. It burns neural pathways deeper and deeper into the brain, especially when emotion is involved. Every emotionally charged thought strengthens its own circuitry. So the more you think of them with intensity, love, regret, anger, desires, the more natural it feels to think of them again. It becomes your default. Your brain begins to associate their image with emotional aliveness. And over time, a part of you craves the thought not because it brings peace, but because it brings feeling. Do you see the danger now? The person who won't leave your mind becomes a source of identity, a remembered wound, a fantasy altar you keep returning to not for answers. But because suffering has become familiar, it's not that you can't stop thinking of them. It's that you no longer know who you are without thinking of them. Now look outward. What does this internal pattern cost you in the external world? Opportunities missed, connections sabotaged, moments blurred by distraction. You try to start something new with someone new, but the shadow of the old is always there, lurking. You compare. You anticipate rejection. You recoil when the new person doesn't match the emotional high of the memory. You don't even realize you're not really dating them. You're dating the absence of someone else. Psychologists call this emotional displacement. When we carry unfinished emotional business from one context into another, we taint new experiences with the residue of the past. And we do this unconsciously, all the while wondering, why does nothing feel real anymore? And maybe that's the cruelest effect of all. Reality begins to dull. The vividness of now pales in comparison to the myth of then, because the mind, caught in its obsession, no longer processes reality as it is. It filters every moment through the lens of someone who isn't even present. That is how a ghost becomes more real than the living. And the cultural machine doesn't help. Modern society thrives on unresolved longing. It packages it, markets it, monetizes it. Movies, songs, novels, they all glorify the ache of someone you can't have. They teach us that obsession equals depth, that fixation equals love, that if you can't stop thinking about someone, it must be fate. But what if it's not fate? What if it's programming? What if culture has hijacked our deepest mythological instincts and turned them into addictive cycles of fantasy and pain? You've been taught to believe that obsession is noble, that the tormented lover is somehow more authentic than the one who has healed. But this belief traps you. It convinces you that moving on is betrayal, that healing is forgetting, that detachment is coldness. And so, you stay in limbo, not because you can't leave, but because part of you believes that leaving would mean it was never real. But ask yourself this: is truth measured by how long we suffer? Or is that just another lie the unconscious clings to when it doesn't know how to let go? There is also the question of identity. When someone lives inside your thoughts for too long, you begin to reshape yourself around them. You don't even notice it happening. A shift in your posture when you think of them. A hesitation in your speech when someone mentions their name. An invisible weight you carry when you're alone, knowing that part of you is somewhere else trapped in a moment. A conversation. A kiss. A betrayal. A goodbye. Viktor Frankl believed that humans are driven not by pleasure, as Freud claimed, but by meaning. We will endure incredible suffering, heartbreak, confusion if we believe it means something, that it serves a purpose. But what if your mind has been mistaking suffering for meaning? What if your fixation on this person has become a substitute for purpose, a placeholder for direction, a stand-in for the real work your soul is asking of you? And what if that work begins the moment you stop seeing them as the answer and start seeing them as the question? The longer you carry someone in your head, the heavier they become, not because of their weight, but because of the way your identity wraps around them. You begin to shrink to fit their memory. You begin to limit your future to avoid disrupting the narrative you've built around them. This is not just emotional stagnation. It's ontological confinement, the shrinking of your very being. But there's another way, a rebellion, a reversal, a breaking of the spell. It doesn't begin by forgetting them. It begins by seeing them clearly at last, not as a soulmate, a demon, a muse, a villain, or a savior, but as a symbol, a reflection, a psychic artifact that once carried the meaning you could not give to yourself. And once you see that, you can begin to reclaim the power you unknowingly gave away. Because the person who won't leave your mind is not your captor. They are the key to the prison you built yourself. Imagine this. You wake up one morning and, for the first time in what feels like forever, their face doesn't immediately rush into your consciousness like an uninvited guest. You sit up. The silence is different. Not hollow, not aching, not haunted, just quiet. And you realize something has shifted. Not because time has finally healed you, but because you've begun the rebellion, not against them, but against your own illusions. This is not the kind of rebellion that's loud or dramatic. It doesn't come with burning bridges or deleting contact lists or pretending they never mattered. That's still obsession in disguise. That's ego trying to cauterize a wound it doesn't know how to treat. No, this rebellion is subtler, quieter, far more radical. It begins with a single truth. They were never the answer, because they were never the question to begin with. You were. The most powerful act of liberation starts not with forgetting the person, but with remembering yourself. The you that existed before them. The you that existed beneath the projection. The you that has been patiently waiting behind the scenes, watching your identity contort itself around a ghost. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." You thought they were fate, but maybe they were just the symptom, the projection, the mirror. So how do you break free from a reflection that's lived so long in your mind it feels like truth? You turn the mirror around. 1. Name the archetype. Stop asking, "Why can't I stop thinking about them?" And start asking, "What part of me did they activate?" Were they the idealized lover? The father figure? The nurturing mother? The forbidden temptation? The one who finally made you feel chosen? What did they represent? When you can name the archetype, you loosen its grip. You start to see them not as a unique savior or soulmate, but as a symbol from your unconscious mythos. A role cast in the theater of your inner world. Jung believed this act of naming was sacred. That when you recognize an archetype, you begin to individuatedo, become whole. Because now, the fixation isn't something happening to you. It's something arising from you. And that shift changes everything. 2. Engage the shadow. The shadow is everything you have exiled from your conscious self. Rage, lust, shame, fear, vulnerability, need. Often, the person you can't stop thinking about has somehow touched or triggered this shadow. Maybe they made you feel seen in a way you were taught to fear, or maybe they exposed a part of you you'd tried to keep buried. Either way, they pulled the shadow to the surface, and now it's your job to stop running from it. Write down what they made you feel. Not just love or longing, but the uncomfortable feelings. The ones you'd rather forget. Ask yourself, what part of me did they threaten? What part of me did they awaken? What part of me did they reject? The rebellion begins when you stop blaming them and start integrating you. 3. Dismantle the myth. Every time you replay that conversation, that night, that betrayal, that silence, you reinforce the story. And stories have power. Maybe you've told yourself they were the one, or that no one will make you feel that way again, or that they destroyed you, or that you almost had something perfect. These are myths, internal fairy tales designed to protect you from a more frightening truth, that life doesn't give closure, that people leave without finishing their sentences, that meaning must be chosen, not found. So choose differently. Write the myth down. Then challenge it. Was it really perfect? Were they truly what you needed? Did they see you? Or just the version you showed them? By deconstructing the narrative, you rob it of its power. You stop being a character in their story and begin writing your own. 4. Replace fixation with ritual. The mind craves repetition. It's how it feels safe. That's why your thoughts spiral toward them in moments of stillness. They're the ritual your brain has memorized. To break the cycle, don't just resist the thought. Replace it with a new ritual, a grounding practice, something small, sacred, and yours. Maybe it's writing, or walking at sunrise, or meditating on the breath instead of the past, or saying one defiant sentence aloud every morning. I return to myself. You can't outthink obsession. You have to retrain the nervous system. Teach your body that safety exists without them, that identity can breathe without their shadow hanging over it. Over time, the mind follows the body. The fixation loses its fuel. 5. Create space for the unknown. This is perhaps the hardest part, because letting go of someone who's lived in your mind for so long isn't just loss, it's existential. It's terrifying. You're not just losing them, you're losing the version of yourself who needed them. And that's why many people never let go. Not because they're weak, but because they're scared of who they'll become without the obsession to hold on to. But what if that unknown self is the real you? What if the space their absence creates is not a void, but a canvas? You've lived long enough inside the story of them. Now, the rebellion is to live inside the story of you. Look at history, at art, at mythology. The most powerful transformations begin with letting go of illusions. The hero leaves the false paradise. The seeker gives up the idol. The wanderer walks into the desert with nothing but silence and finds themselves at last. You are that hero now. The person on your mind has played their part. They've awakened something in you, shattered something, rebuilt something. And now, the rest is not about them. It's about who you choose to become on the other side of the storm. Let this be your moment of revolt. Not a loud one, not a cruel one, but a sacred one. A gentle, fierce, irreversible yes to your own becoming. And still there is one final piece left. One truth deeper than all others. A revelation so profound that once it is seen, the illusion collapses for good. There's a moment quiet, almost imperceptible, where you stop asking why they're on your mind. And instead, you begin to ask, why was I never truly on mine? This is the moment the entire illusion begins to dissolve. The final curtain falls, and in its place stands not an answer, but a revelation and undoing of everything you thought this journey was about. Because it was never about them. Not really. It was always about you, about the fractured mirror of your own consciousness, and the way you handed someone else the power to reflect you back to yourself. They didn't stay in your mind because they were so significant. They stayed because you never finished the sentence that began with their name. Carl Jung called this an antiodromiata phenomenon, where something pursued too intensely begins to transform into its opposite. Love becomes obsession. Memory becomes possession. Desire becomes identity. The more you chased their image in your mind, the further you drifted from your own reflection. But now, in the silence that follows your rebellion, you see what was hidden all along. The person you couldn't stop thinking about was never the destination. They were the mirror, and more than that, they were a wound shaped like a person. Think back, not to them, but to you. In the moment you first felt them imprint onto your consciousness, what were you missing? What did you believe they gave you? Attention? Belonging? Permission to feel? A sense of being chosen? That thing, the feeling they awakened in you, was never theirs to give. It was yours, all along. But you had forgotten how to hold it without an external source, forgotten that your longing was never for them, but for the version of yourself that came alive in their presence. That's the truth. They're on your mind not because they're yours, or because you were meant to be. They're on your mind because, at some pivotal moment, they carried a piece of your soul you were not ready to carry alone. But you are now. And so, we arrive at the final, most powerful realization. You don't need to stop thinking about them. You need to reclaim what they represent. Let their presence in your mind be a map not to them, but to yourself. Let every moment they cross your thoughts become an invitation not to mourn or ruminate, but to return to something deeper. Ask, what do I feel in their absence that I can learn to give myself? Not as a substitution, not as compensation, but as integration, wholeness. Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "We are our choices, and this is your final choice. To stop waiting for someone to leave your mind, and to start showing up for the parts of yourself you've abandoned there." Because here's the paradox. The more you try to evict them, the more you focus on the door. But when you invite them to sit, listen not to their voice, but to what they reveal, you discover they are not your captor. They are your creation. And every creation reflects its creator. The cinematic ending isn't them coming back. It's you walking away not with bitterness or regret, but with reverence. Because now you understand. They were the fire that burned away the false self. They were the storm that cleared the air of illusion. They were the ghost that taught you how to feel real again. And as their presence fades not because you forced it, but because it's no longer necessary, are left with something far more enduring. A self that is no longer divided. A self that does not chase, or cling, or need to rewrite the past. A self that doesn't confuse suffering with love, or obsession with depth, or silence with absence. Now, you wake up, you breathe. The silence is still there, but it doesn't hurt. You sip your coffee, walk through your day. Their face may flicker through your thoughts, but it's soft now, lighter. Not because they mean less, but because you mean more. Because the wound has become wisdom, the ache has become art, and the memory, it has become a sacred reminder of who you used to be. Before you became the person who no longer needs to carry anyone else to feel whole. So now, the real question is not, why are they always on your mind? The real question is, what masterpiece will you create now that you've returned to yourself?